It's 10 o'clock. This is Sky News at 10, our top story. The biggest miscarriage of justice in the history of this country. The Prime Minister announces the victims of the post office scandal will be compensated by the end of the year.
I can announce that we will introduce new primary legislation to make sure that those convicted as a result of the Horizon scandal are swiftly exonerated.
Sure.
We've got you.
Yeah. Mom is going to court and I might not come back.
We also hear from the people who raised the alarm and the private company at the centre of the scandal, which led to hundreds of postmasters being wrongly convicted. Also tonight, a British warship shoots down drones in the Red Sea as the Defence Secretary suggests UK and US forces could be gearing up to strike Iranian-backed Houthi militants in Yemen. One of the biggest baby formula brands cuts prices after being accused of exploiting families following a Sky News investigation. And a special report on dementia care in the UK after concerns are raised about the treatment of people in care homes and questions raised over proper training. Plus, we'll take a first look at tomorrow's front pages. That's coming up in our press preview from 10:30 right through to midnight. Hello, good evening. They were given criminal records, vilified in their local communities, and many spent time in jail. Now, finally, hundreds of innocent postmasters will be exonerated and receive compensation. Downing Street today announced new legislation and said it hoped to have convictions quashed by the end of the year. In a moment, we'll look at the company at the heart of the scandal and hear from the people who raised the concerns at the beginning. But first, our political editor Beth Rigby reports on today's announcement and the reaction from those affected.
Post Office Limited is stealing my livelihood, my shop, my job.
They've been fighting for justice for decades, but it took a TV drama to finally bring about change.
I haven't got that money, and I don't know where it's gone.
Now a resolution for victims of the Post Office scandal at last on the horizon.
Will you finally deliver justice for the postmasters?
This not a scandal of Rishi Sunak's making, but one he has to resolve, and fast.
Mr. Speaker, this is one of the greatest miscarriages of justice in our nation's history.
Today announcing a plan to overturn hundreds of wrongful convictions of postmasters.
I can announce that we will introduce new primary legislation to make sure that those convicted as a result of the Horizon scandal are swiftly exonerated and compensated.
That legislation landing within weeks and compensation planned by the end of the year. On this, MPs across the political divide united.
It is a huge injustice. I'm glad the Prime Minister is putting forward a proposal. We will look at the details, and I think it's the job of all of us to make sure that it delivers the justice that is so needed.
To that end, Postal Minister Kevin Hollinrake in the Commons confirming convictions will be overturned on a blanket basis.
We recognise this is an exceptional step, but these are exceptional circumstances. All we ask is that as part of their claims of compensation, postmasters sign a statement to the effect they did not commit the crimes of which they're accused.
It's what so many wrongly convicted people have been waiting for.
I called my oldest and I said, look, Mom is going to call.
Teju Adedeo was given a suspended sentence.
Sure.
She considered taking her own life.
What I would like is to see all of them exonerated, every single name read out and your sentences quashed. I believe in that because you don't want to go looking for a job or applying for a visa somewhere and it's still there.
For Mark Kelly, the announcement is too little, too late.
I started to blame myself, so I became quite suicidal.
Given that you've been involved in the group campaigning for many years now, did you feel pleased for your colleagues in this, that they actually will get those convictions overturned?
At the moment, though, the story is all about the convictions, and there's a lot of people who have suffered just as much as convictions, and they are not being looked into, and also the immediate families.
For hundreds of people like Mark, this is the most significant step yet in their quest for justice. But this scandal far from over. Now, IT giant Fujitsu that designed the faulty software in the firing line, as questions grow over how this injustice came to pass and how to ensure it never happens again. Beth Rigby, Sky News, Westminster.
Well, the public inquiry into the post office scandal, which started in 2020, is due to resume tomorrow. It will now look at the original criminal investigations and examine who was responsible for failing to reveal the truth about the faulty Horizon computer system. Our business correspondent Adele Robinson has been looking at what happened.
Hundreds of lives ruined by what was one of the most trusted institutions in Britain, the Post Office, with questions still unanswered over who knew what and when.
Completely overturned the case once we did find it.
Forensic accountant Ian Henderson was the first to find a smoking gun.
I was unable to find any evidence of theft or that the cash figures had been deliberately inflated.
A document proving at least one unsafe conviction in the Post Office scandal for a woman called Jo Hamilton, persuaded to plead guilty to false accounting.
This document that led us to the provisional view that we may be dealing with multiple miscarriages of justice. Certainly in the case of Jo Hamilton, this should have been disclosed to her at the time of her prosecution. It wasn't. And it completely contradicted the main charges that were brought against her.
Did you find more like these?
There were other cases like this, yes.
Hundreds of sub-postmasters were convicted after faulty computer software made it look like money was missing. Ian was part of an independent team investigating the Horizon system operated by Fujitsu. He discovered the company could access branch terminals remotely.
Individual sort of branch level were therefore potentially capable of being manipulated by other than the sub-postmaster. Therefore, the sub-postmaster was not fully in control of their own sort of transactions. That was a huge concern.
Another IT expert, Jason Coyne, claims he told the Post Office about his concerns of discrepancies in the system.
It was relatively clear that the software was probably rolled out too soon. The levels of testing or user acceptance had not been conducted properly. But instead what was happening is the software was put live and then the users, the sub-postmasters, were being used largely as the guinea pigs.
The Post Office say it's for the public inquiry to reach its own independent conclusions after considering all evidence, while a statement from the software company at the heart of this, Fujitsu, reads, "The inquiries reinforce the devastating impact on postmasters' lives and that of their families, and Fujitsu has apologised for its role in their suffering. Fujitsu's fully committed to supporting the inquiry in order to understand what happened and to learn from it." Fujitsu workers will give evidence next week amid accusations of a cover-up as part of an inquiry to determine who knew what and when. Adele Robinson, Sky News.
Well, to our political editor, Beth Rigby in Downing Street. So after more than 2 decades, Beth, a scandal which now has the full focus of all in Parliament, including the PM. So what next?
Well, Anna, this was a scandal that was not of the Prime Minister's making. As you said, it's been going on for 2 decades under successive governments, but it was one that he had to resolve and quickly, and in that he is meeting the moment. Sir David Davis, a senior Conservative who's been campaigning on this issue, said earlier in this week on Monday that it had to be sorted out in months, not years. Well, now we have today, just 48 hours after he made those remarks, a Prime Minister saying that he will table this legislation within weeks to overturn those convictions en masse, and in terms of payments, offering those upfront payments of up to £75,000 for those affected. So really moving fast. And I think tonight this is a Prime Minister that has read the room, he has sensed national mood, and he has moved the fire, if you like, of this scandal away for the moment from the government. But when you say where do we go next, this is just the end of the beginning, if you like, because as there is resolution for the victims of these massive miscarriages of justice, attention, of course, now in the inquiry onto who is responsible. And I think there's questions for Fujitsu, the IT software company who were responsible for this faulty system. And then, of course, questions for big bosses at the post office, questions about whether people might be made to pay back bonuses and whether or not people themselves will have to pay the price personally for being involved in this scandal. That's all going to unfold in the coming months as the inquiry continues. But for the moment, for politicians, I think there was unity across the House. There's, of course, questions for politicians who are involved in this area when those convictions were happening, not least Sir Ed Davey, who was back in the coalition years, the Post Office Minister. But for now, in terms of the political pressure moving away from Rishi Sunak and very firmly onto the corporate companies involved in this scandal.
Beth Rigby, live for us there in Downing Street. Thank you. Now, Britain and the United States have warned that they will take action if Houthi rebels continue to attack ships sailing through the Red Sea. This morning, a British warship shot down 7 drones launched by Iranian-backed fighters. Well, these dots on the map show incidents in the Red Sea and Gulf of Aden over the last 8 weeks. They include reports of boarding, physical damage to vessels, suspicious approaches and more. The first saw the seizure of the Japanese-operated cargo ship Galaxy Leader on November the 19th. On December the 16th, a British warship shot down a suspected Houthi attack drone in the Red Sea. And last night, in what's been described as the largest Houthi attack yet, a British warship shot down 7 drones in an operation with US forces. Well, the Red Sea is the entrance to the Suez Canal, used to transport 15% of the world's goods. Recent attacks have caused shipping companies to avoid the route, instead going the long way around the Cape of Good Hope. 12,000 nautical miles and an extra 10 days means delays and shortages of goods arriving in Europe. Our security and defence editor Deborah Haynes has more.
A British warship shoots down drones launched by militants in Yemen linked to Iran. The attack by Houthi rebels was in defiance of a warning by the UK and others to stop targeting ships in the Red Sea. Words ignored, Britain signalled a coalition led by the US could be about to strike back with weapons, hitting Houthi targets inside Yemen. The Defence Secretary also accused Iran of meddling.
Well, we saw this huge attack last night by the Houthi militants, but be in no doubt at all, Iran is guiding what is happening there in the Red Sea, providing them not just with equipment to carry out those attacks, but also often with the eyes and ears to allow those attacks to happen. Enough is enough. We must be clear with the Houthis that this has to stop, and that is my simple message to them today, and watch this space.
Underlining the volatility of this region, Houthi militants in November started attacking ships linked to Israel in the Red Sea in protest at the war in Gaza. Attacks like this prompted Western allies to send warships and aircraft to bolster the protection of shipping lanes, which are vital for world trade. HMS Diamond, a British destroyer, worked with US vessels and jets to thwart Tuesday night's attack, the largest so far. They could now turn their firepower against Houthi launch sites for missiles and drones inside Yemen in what would be a major expansion of the crisis. But it's not the only one.
As tensions escalate with Iran in the Middle East, Western allies are also concerned about growing Iranian support for Russia's war in Ukraine. A security source has told me they believe Iran has developed a new drone for Russian forces there, and that Tehran appears to be close to providing ballistic missiles to Moscow in what would be a highly significant move.
Russia has launched waves of missile and drone strikes against Ukraine in the past month. Any new Iranian supplies would ramp up the pressure as Western support to Ukrainian troops dwindles.
They've decided strategically, I think, to throw in their lot with Russia and by implication also China, because they see a realignment of world politics taking place before our eyes. And they think that this will help put them on the side that will eventually prevail.
What happens next in Ukraine and in the Middle East could indicate whether Iran was right or whether the West's will still carries weight. Deborah Hames, Sky News.
Well, to our US correspondent Mark Stone in Washington, strong words certainly from the US and the UK today. Mark, do they now have to take action against the Houthi rebels, and what happens if they do?
Well, I think they feel they do have to take action. I mean, look, remember, all of this latest escalation began on October the 7th with the attacks from Hamas in Gaza. The overriding objective of the West has been to contain the crisis, but you could argue it's already not contained. That map you showed just before Deborah's report shows just one part of the Middle East where things have clearly spilt over. The presence of Western warships in the Mediterranean, in the Red Sea as well, that hasn't deterred malign influences. The actual attacking of drones that are incoming, that hasn't deterred it either. And so the next stage will be to follow through, as the West will see it, on their threats. The question, of course, is what will that lead to? How will the Houthis respond? How will Iran respond to that? Could we potentially see the Houthis increasing their attacks on Israel itself, as they have tried to do before? How will Israel respond to that? This is yet another very dangerous moment. And remember, too, that American influence in the region is really being tested right now, and that will be on the mind of President Biden as he's focused elsewhere on an election here too, as he wonders what to do next.
Mark Stone, live for us there in Washington. Thank you. Britain's biggest provider of baby formula says it will reduce the price of some of its powdered milk from next week. The decision from Danone, which owns the brand Aptamil, means supermarkets now have to decide whether to pass the cut on to customers. It comes after an investigation by Sky's national correspondent Tom Parmenter, who revealed the desperate measures some families have been taking. This is his latest report.
For many parents, the baby aisle is a place of dread. Infant formula prices have risen by an average of 25% over the last 2 years, and many just can't afford it. Aptamil is one of the biggest, most expensive brands, but the manufacturer Danone is now cutting the cost of it by 7%, just in time for Charlie, who is giving birth next week.
You shouldn't make profit on things like this because this is a basic need, and there's a lot of families that are struggling to fulfil that need at the moment. I am, a massive advocate for breastfeeding, but people struggle for genuine reasons to breastfeed, and I feel like they shouldn't have to be punished because they make the choice to give their child a bottle.
Iceland and Food Warehouse have already promised to pass the saving on to customers as soon as they can. It comes a month after the Competition and Markets Authority accused manufacturers of hiking prices well above production costs.
The brands can't take the mickey and they can't exploit the loyalty that customers have to their brands.
Do you think that's what they've done?
Well, the CMA report was pretty unequivocal. So ultimately what I'd like to see, and you don't hear retailers say this very often publicly, is a price cap.
We asked the other manufacturers if they will be reducing their prices. Nestlé told us it couldn't comment on decisions made by competitors, but continues to try to make its products affordable. Kendamil said it offers products at a fair price, and Danone's reduction was long overdue. It added that prices of the dominant multinationals are still unjustifiable. Families want to see the cost of baby formula drop right across the board. These multinational manufacturers who are producing it make billions of pounds in profit, while parents have been struggling to afford to feed their babies. The outcry that followed Sky News' investigation last year is now leading to change in an industry that's been accused of exploiting parents.
We need absolute transparency around
formula manufacturing and the costs, and the government have a huge role to play in putting that pressure on the formula companies. And we need to start looking at alternatives to these small price reductions and other small actions that groups like Feed are trying to do to just make tiny differences. We need big change, we need bold change.
One price cut from one manufacturer isn't enough. It will take concerted effort from the industry and policymakers to solve this crisis for babies and their parents. Tom Parmenter, Sky News.
Now, for many families, putting their loved ones in a care home is a last resort, but necessary if they have specific needs. But the Alzheimer's Society has told Sky News that the adult social care system in the UK is failing people suffering with dementia. The government is facing renewed calls for better investment and improved staff training. Sky's Shingi Marike has seen and heard evidence of negligence at one care home in Sheffield.
Let video see what it is.
Do you know? Just point it to the video. Just point the...
She was just life and soul at party, really. Yeah, she was. Everywhere she went, everybody loved her. You know, everybody knew my mum.
Jeanette and Lisa often talk about their mum Rita like somebody they used to know. Not because she's no longer here, but because they're grieving for the person she was before a dementia diagnosis.
When her illness worsened, they were advised to place her in a care home between 2021 and 2023.
Every time I went, my mum would wet through and we were having to ask them to change her. That's why my mum got put in this place, to be cared for, to be looked after, to be clean and dry.
She was also often left in this position, her head hanging low, neck unsupported.
Just on a dining chair, sort of more or less either with her head on the table or more or less just folded in half.
Rita also had a number of unwitnessed falls, resulting in these injuries and adding to her daughter's concerns for her well-being. Rita was staying at Abbey Grange Care Home in Sheffield. The Care Quality Commission inspected the home on 20th July 2022 in response to specific concerns raised to them. After this inspection, the home remained rated good overall, with the CQC concluding staff there understood how to protect people from harm.
In issues that go beyond just this home, the Alzheimer's Society told us thousands of people are being let down by an adult care system which needs better investment and better training.
We've also spoken to one person who between 2022 and 2023 worked at Abbey Grange. They also believe so many of the alleged issues at the home stem from poor training.
You don't have no moving and handling experience. There's certain ways you can pick them up, lift them and help them and stuff, support them. You don't get that. So if I'd have gone in and just basically rolled a lady over who'd got fragile skin, I could have tore her skin.
Country Court, the company that runs the home, decided not to comment on all the allegations in this report.
We've been speaking to the Department of Health and Social Care about the issues we've uncovered. It said all dementia care staff should be receiving training that the government has delivered in collaboration with the care sector.
Happy birthday to you.
In November of last year, Rita moved into a new home, where she celebrated her 77th birthday. Her family says she's healthier and happier, but they are still angry at her home and the system, which they believe cost her 18 months of her life. Shingi Marike, Sky News.
The American politician Chris Christie is planning to announce that he is pulling out of the race to represent the Republican Party in the US presidential race. The former governor of New Jersey, who is a firm critic of Donald Trump, received the support of only 2% of Republicans in a nationwide Reuters Ipsos poll released today. It comes less than a week before the Iowa caucuses, the first challenge for the candidate hopefuls to become in the 2024 election race. The boss of Boeing has said a quality escape probably caused a door to blow off an Alaska Airlines flight last week. 170 737 MAX 9 planes have been grounded in the US for checks. Boeing said the company would repair all faulty aircraft.
No airplane will fly. None of the Dash 9s will fly with an unsafe condition. That I can promise. All of the work that we have to do in the background in the quality systems to ensure that on an ongoing basis it never happens again, that work is ahead of us.
Yorkshire County Cricket Club's board has agreed to recommend its members approve a financial deal that could lead to former chairman Colin Graves taking control again. Mr Graves presided over Yorkshire cricket during a period in which it admitted a charge of failing to address the systemic use of racist or discriminatory language. Officials in Taiwan have accused China of attempting to influence voters in Taiwan's presidential elections this Saturday. The opposition KMT party favours building closer relations with China, while the ruling DPP takes a harder line. But as the election approaches, China has ramped up military pressure on Taipei and described Saturday's elections as a choice between war and peace. Well, Taiwan's capital, Taipei, is more than 1,000 miles away from Beijing. But near China's southeast coast, Taiwan's Kinmen Islands are just over a mile from mainland China. Our Asia correspondent, Helen Ansmith, took the short ferry ride from Jiangmen in China's Fujian province to the Kinmen Islands.
From the beaches of southwest China, there is a part of Taiwan close enough you can see it. In fact, so close to the Taiwanese Kinmen Islands, you can travel there by ferry. Plenty do. To buy goods or do business, the journey is just half an hour long. A matter of miles in terms of the distance, much further in terms of politics and direction.
This journey is short enough that we can quite clearly see both our starting point and our destination, but it offers another vantage point too. It is an insight of sorts into the complex, intertwined relationship between China and Taiwan, the struggle over what their future should look like, and crucially, the threat that one poses to the other.
Indeed, everywhere on this island is an awareness it's vulnerable. From the bases to the battlements, the military are preparing. And this week's election will heighten the tension. This man, Lai Ching-te, is the most likely to win. His DPP party takes the hardest line against China.
It's a camp.
Oh, it's a camp.
Wen Chulan believes Kinmen would be the front line. He takes us to see the historic sites likely recommissioned in the event of an invasion. He doesn't think it's imminent, but he does think it's possible. And he shows us the kit he's prepared.
So you carry Chinese currency so that if there's a war, you can bribe soldiers?
It's important.
China's actions means he'll vote for the DPP. Their continuous military threats are counterproductive, he says. Older people tend to believe we should prioritise peace over the nation. I believe the opposite. The nation should come first, and then we can discuss how to engage in equal exchanges. But many others disagree. This choir has performed on the mainland. Cultural exchanges, just one way China aims to win hearts and minds. Shi Tsongchen doesn't support full reunification, but he does favour the more China-friendly opposition.
Both Taiwan and the mainland belong to the Chinese culture, so basically, trying to separate them is not right.
Who do you think is most to blame for the deteriorating relations between China and Taiwan?
The main problem is the ruling party. It's been emphasising Taiwan's independence.
There's still no clear view on how China will respond to the vote. But here, at Taiwan's closest point, there is a sense some at least are bracing. Helen Ansmith, Sky News, in the Kinmen Islands, Taiwan.
Well, that was Sky News at 10. Coming up, we'll take a first look at tomorrow's newspapers in the press preview. Tonight, joined by the Mirror's Associate Editor, Kevin Maguire, and the Telegraph's Deputy Comment Editor, Annabel Denham. Among the stories, we will be discussing this on the front of the Metro about government moves to overturn wrongful convictions in the Post Office scandal. Justice by special delivery, their headline. Right back with that and plenty more. Well, this is Sky News. In just a moment, the press preview, a first look at what is on the front pages. First, though, our top stories. The Prime Minister has said blanket legislation to clear victims of the post office scandal in England and Wales will be put before Parliament within weeks. The UK and the US have threatened further retaliation after a British warship shot down multiple drones to repel the largest Houthi attack yet in the Red Sea. And Britain's biggest provider of baby formula has said it will reduce the price of some of its powdered milk from next week. Supermarkets will have to decide whether to pass the cut on to customers. Well, just a quick bit of breaking news. We'd heard earlier there was an avalanche in Palisades, Tahoe, on the west coast of the US. We're just hearing now that one person has died and one person has been injured. Searches there continuing. It came as a major storm with snow and gusty winds moved into the region. So we will keep an eye on that story. But so far, one dead and one injured in that major avalanche in California. Hello there, you're watching the press preview. A first look at what is on the front pages. Time to see what's making the headlines then with the Mirror's associate editor, Kevin Maguire, and the Telegraph's deputy comment editor, Annabel Denham. Welcome to both of you. Kevin's finding it a bit chilly in the studio, but we'll see. It is chilly, yes. I like it chilly. Anyway, front pages, let's take a look, shall we? And the Metro reacts to the Prime Minister's announcement of special legislation to exonerate wrongfully convicted sub-postmasters with the headline, Justice by Special Delivery. Justice is also the word that features on the front of the Daily Express. This is the front of The Guardian, then, which says that hundreds of victims of the scandal will now have their convictions overturned. Same story for the FT, which says the proposed law could be brought before Parliament within weeks. Daily Mail, though, says hundreds of victims who were never actually charged now face an uphill battle to get the same compensation as everybody else. The Telegraph reports that post office investigators were offered cash bonuses for every postmaster convicted. Daily Star launches a campaign for the man who led the fight against the post office, Alan Bates, to be awarded a knighthood for his achievement. And The Eye says there are growing demands for Fujitsu, the computer firm at the heart of the scandal, to be punished for its failings. But a reminder, by scanning the QR code that you'll see on screen, you can check out the front pages for yourself of tomorrow's newspapers while you listen to our guests. So let's go to Kevin and Annabel. Yes, goodness me, clean sweep there. Not surprising, perhaps. Major change announced by the Prime Minister today, and the Metro calling it justice by special delivery, Kevin.
Yeah, it's a clever headline. That's what it was. The announcement of the Prime Minister's questions about a law that will exonerate, he said, quash the convictions of the 700 plus. Some people are a bit queasy about that because of Parliament interfering in the judicial process and the courts. And also there is likely along the way to be a few people who may have had sticky fingers being cleared too. But the gravity of the miscarriage of justice is such, I think it justifies what is happening. But I still feel we're in the sort of end of the beginning rather than the beginning of the end, because there are all those cases going to be heard, all those stories. And of course, you go on to who at the post office, who at Fujitsu. Maybe we should call it the Fujitsu post office scandal rather than just the post office scandal. You know, who knew, who covered it up, and then what happens to them?
Yes, you feel like you're midway through the forensic unpicking of what happened, who knew and how it happened. We'll certainly come on to that Telegraph story shortly. In the meantime, though, the government had different options, didn't they? Either expedite through the courts or do this special legislation through Parliament, which, as Kevin has pointed out, has made people a little bit queasy about effectively parliamentarians deciding who, you know, the innocence of people.
Of course, this is an unprecedented move, I believe, and it has left legal experts feeling perhaps awkward, a bit uncomfortable, a bit queasy. As Kevin says, there'll be this bill in the next few weeks. There are these concerns about that, you know, the erosion of the separation between Parliament and the judiciary as a consequence. And let's not forget that a day ago, Alex Chalk, the Justice Secretary, was hinting that all sorts of options would be explored, exhausted even before the government resorted to this measure. Well, they certainly exhausted those options rather quickly, because here we are at lunchtime today, Rishi Sunak stood up and made that announcement. But it is some relief at least for those who have been wrongly convicted in this terrible miscarriage of justice. But as you say, there are so many more questions that need to be answered, questions which haven't even been asked. There has been so much obfuscation, so many sort of tactics of delay, people who have sat on their hands, and we just don't know the full scale of it yet. But certainly those victims of this outrageous injustice, this scandal, one hopes.
You see the power of a good TV drama, which is what's happened here. Mr. Bates versus the post officers has just put rocket fuel under this.
And many of us wept watching it. I mean, you know, it's really emotional.
It was
experience.
Because it humanised it, and you see that the cases, they're all people, they're all flesh and blood with their own stories and their families, and the tales of how they were ruined, rather than just seeing large numbers, more than 700 convictions. And you think that's absolutely terrible, but then behind those 700 are men and women who've been to hell and back. But
it's extraordinary, like you said, how quickly the government machine can click into gear when the incentives, when the impetus, and when the public pressure demands it. But this has been rumbling on for years, 25 years. These people have been waiting.
No, it's had a lot of media coverage along the way. Computer Weekly and Private Eye, Daily Mail have done a lot. You've done it in Sky, other broadcasters. You've done it in Telegraph. We've done it in the Mirror. It's all been there. And of course, there's been big court cases, like 2019, Landmark, when the High Court said that these convictions are unsafe because the Horizon IT isn't foolproof. People can access it who aren't postmasters and so on and so on. But it is the TV drama that's just captured the public imagination. And Kevin Hollinrake, the Post Office Minister, said actually, it has played a role, because all of a sudden the pressure is built on the government, and governments do respond to pressure and public will. They can resist it sometimes foolishly, and other times they see how the wind is blowing and they act swiftly.
It's extraordinary, though, the Post Office Minister this morning saying that there had been trial by media, that in some way he felt that perhaps the government was being poorly treated through this. Well, in fact, the opposite is the case. It's been the media which has helped apply.
In this case,
But we're still in the messy phase, aren't we? Because there are different groups. There are those who were convicted. There are those whose lives were ruined even without a conviction as well. The original 555 who won a case, but then lost a lot of that money because they had to have investors to help them bring the case in the first place. So they need extra compensation. And there are those who lost their home, their business. You know, we had people on earlier in the UK tonight who, one of them was sectioned through anxiety because of this.
Horrific.
And another one who had to tell her children, I'm going, but I may not come home today. You know, eventually got a suspended sentence. But, you know, the pain is very real. And actually, many of them want to see their convictions quashed in the court of law, which may not now happen under this blanket legislation.
I know. They were dragged to court and found guilty when they were innocent. And so I understand why they'd want to go back and, I don't know, stand in the dock and be told you're innocent, grotesque miscarriage of justice, you're free to walk away without a stain on your good character.
There was never a case to answer until...
And adequate justice had been served, because at the present they are going to sign this written statement to say that they are innocent. But
which they find, many of them find an affront as well. Daily Mail says there's a battle over the £75,000 deal. You know, many of them saying they want to hold out for more because of the implications to their families. So, you know, as I said, it's the messy phase we're in.
But it is. I mean, like how much money can compensate you if you've been wrongly convicted? Your family might have turned against you. You've been screamed at in the streets. You've lost your home. Your good name is gone. You've been sectioned, or those who took their lives. Probably no amount of money, but the system will have to come up with a figure, as it usually does. But if somebody gets 600,000, says it isn't enough, who are we to argue with them? They may not get any more, but you would understand why they feel it isn't adequate.
So let's go to the Daily Telegraph, which has sort of substantive new information, effectively. The suggestion that the Post Office handed out bonuses for convictions, and this is part of evidence that has been handed to the inquiry, which resumes on Thursday, set up back in 2020. We heard from the Post Office Minister, expected to finish taking evidence at the end of this year and then report. But specifically, Annabelle, what is this suggesting then?
Sure. So this is the story that post office investigators were being given cash bonuses for every sub-postmaster who was convicted during this scandal. It's a breaking news story which Alan Bates has said highlights the horrendous culture at the post office, and I think it speaks to the incentives throughout this scandal. And it's something that I've long thought about, is what motivated people, what motivated post office prosecutors to go after the salt of the earth sub-postmasters who are working in these local communities, who were pillars of those local communities. What was it about human instinct that meant that there was such inertia in handling it, that allowed it to go on for 25 years and so on and so forth. And, this, unfortunately, in some ways speaks to that and the way in which the post office had been run. I think readers are going to be incensed when they see this.
There's an investigator, Gary Thomas, worked 2000 to 2012 in the investigations unit, who's sort of blown the whistle on this at the inquiry. But emails showed he and others were referring to sub-postmasters and mistresses in general as crooks, as if they were all being seen as guilty. Now, I think it gets to the heart, in a way, of how you incentivise employees. And if you think, right, payment by results, which means if you're an investigator, you've got to be nailing people. And I think it's the wrong way. It's the wrong way to do it. It's rather like you don't want traffic wardens to be paid how many parking tickets they give out, because otherwise there's a incentive them from sometimes, should I give them a ticket or not? Well, I'll give them a ticket because my pay depends on it. And I think it's a wider problem in the economy, but I think in particular here it's wrong. It's as if the post office thought its investigators would be lazy unless they were getting them to be pulling in lots of sub-postmasters and mistresses.
It also shows the ferociousness of the commitment of the post office to, to find these people as well, doesn't it? And we know that they were locked out of their post office offices and could not go back in to find information that might have exonerated them. So they couldn't go back and help their defence.
If the post office wanted to defend and protect the legitimacy of the entire system, then I would applaud that.
And where was the forensics going through their bank accounts to find out where the supposed 36 rounds of stolen had gone?
But you'd have to have an IT system that can stand up and be accountable itself, and this one wasn't.
Well, there are obviously questions to be asked over the independence of the post office, the fact that it was able to bring these private prosecutions. I think our faith in the justice system has been shattered reading about this story. The fact that there appears to have been a presumption of guilt, like you say, the assumption that these people were crooks. The onus was on them to prove their innocence. The fact that there was that legal quirk, the change about 25 years ago, which meant that computers were assumed to be accurate, and the sub-postmasters were then in a position where they had to try and prove that they were faulty.
Yes,
everything
not the other way around.
had been inverted.
Yeah. So the Daily Star, obviously, talking about a potential knighthood for Mr Bates. He was asked about that today, suggesting it was not about me. But, of course, Paula Venables has given back her CBE, although, of course, many people pointing out Paula Venables is not the CEO the Post Office has had during the, 25 years of this. But, ultimately... eventually, he said that the next book would be a holiday for Mr Bates, because that's not yet come and the fight's not yet over, obviously. And as we can see, the fight's not yet over, is it really? Yeah,
well, he was offered an OBE, but he turned it down because she had her CBE. You could quite quickly give him that OBE back. You can do quick honours if you wish. Did you want a knighthood? Well, I don't really particularly like the honours system the way it is, but if anyone deserves something, I would have thought it would be him. But will that then create divisions with other postmasters and mistresses? Does he want one? I think the Mirror's got a campaign as well. I think we might have just been going for a CBE there. The Star's gone for a full knighthood.
He'll be in the laws before we know it.
The Telegraph will be for a peerage.
Well, I think it's, many decades of hard labour that he's put in, isn't it, really, as we've seen. Anyway, lots more still to come in the next part of our programme. Could the world's next major conflict soon be underway in the Red Sea? We'll discuss that in just a moment.
I'm Alex Crawford and I'm Sky's special correspondent based in Istanbul. We aim to be the best and the most trusted place for news.
Well, welcome back. You're watching the press preview with me once again, Kev Maguire and Annabel Den, and welcome back to both of you. Annabel, should we go to the Financial Times now and the situation in the Red Sea and the Gulf of Aden, indeed, with obviously warnings now from the US and the UK about retaliation should these Houthi attacks continue. I mean, are they boxing themselves in a corner when we actually should now start to anticipate military intervention?
Well, look, 12 countries issued a joint statement condemning the attacks. I think there's a history here of the West saying that these cannot continue, and yet they are indeed continuing. You know, US and British forces shot down 21 drones and missiles fired by the Houthis on Tuesday night. A very strong sense now that this is escalating. Extraordinary picture on board the HMS Diamond of staff on board wearing anti-flash hoods worn when at the highest state of alert in order to prevent burns should the ships be hit. The experiences of these officers on board are absolutely unimaginable. They are in this constant state of alert where they will have seconds in order to prepare for incoming missiles. But there are so many questions to be asked, not least about the willingness of Iran, which is engaged in these proxy conflicts through groups like Hamas and Hezbollah and the Houthis, which it's backing financially, in terms of how far it is actually willing to go and whether it would enter into some kind of direct conflict with the Western alliance. And at the moment, there are some doubts over that.
Yes, and the question is, what do you attack and where do you attack? If you attack Yemen, do you re-inflame that war, which is going through a slightly quieter period, which has caused utter devastation to the people of Yemen, hasn't it?
No, absolutely. In Saudi Arabia,
starvation of children.
Yeah, and Saudi Arabia was using British arms warplanes to attack schools, markets,
which is your
kill
proxy,
a lot of Houthis.
Saudis versus the
No,
Iranians,
absolutely. It's a terrible civil war there. And it's a hard judgment call for the UK, US and others. You've got to show some force, but if you show too much force, you just escalate it. But you need a deterrent. If they're going to keep firing at shipping in that area, then you're going to have to somehow stop. And you don't just fire at the drones and the missiles. You've got to stop where they're being launched from. But that is an escalation you hope can be avoided. Whether it can or not, I don't know. But you got a feel for the crew there, as you say, on the British ship and the other ships when they're. Yeah, they know the dangers.
Yeah, it's the bottom of the front page of The Guardian as well, quoting Grant Shapps, the UK Defence Secretary, telling people to watch this space at a press briefing, directly accusing Iran of helping the Yemeni rebels, if you've got The Guardian. Not as dramatic a picture, certainly there. But anyway, we watch this space, is all we need to say about that one. In the meantime, Telegraph, Labour claims to want to end the nanny state. In what way? To protect Britain's youth under a raft of reforms, Annabel?
Yes, well, this is right. So Keir Starmer is going to be announcing his Child Health Action Plan. Today he's written an opinion piece in The Guardian condemning the Tories' record with children, the fact that a growing number of pupils are leaving school who are obese, concerns about overweight children. Of course, this story, which we read about a few months months ago on supervised toothbrushing has reared its head, having been quite ridiculed at the time. And the Tories have accusing Labour of bringing Britain back into the nanny state. But I think that that's...
These will be all these Tories brought up by nannies and employing nannies, like Jake Maurice-Mogg. Oh, come on.
Run out of time. We'll talk more about that one later. Kevin, Annabelle, thank you. See you for the 11 as well. Here's the weather.
Warm memories wherever you go. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
So the next few days look mostly quiet and cold, you've probably noticed, with a stiff breeze bringing a significant wind chill to many. Southern and northwestern Britain and the west of Ireland will have a fairly sunny, frosty start tomorrow. Central and northeastern parts will be a bit milder under a blanket of cloud. A few light showers there too. So central Britain staying mostly cloudy through the morning. Patchy, drizzly outbreaks there tend to die away. Ireland, northern and central Scotland will see the cloud breaking.
The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.